You're listening to a Apartheid of podcast, the Get to Know Project. Listen and resist. Welcome back, everyone, to the Get to Know Project. Today, I'm so happy to be joined with a student who's going to talk to us about pinkwashing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to kick things straight off with just talking about what is pinkwashing and how it relates to Palestine.
So, pinkwashing is defined by pinkwashing Israel as the cynical use of gay rights to distract from and normalize Israeli occupation. So pinkwashing is part of Israel's Brand Israel campaign, which started in 2005-2006 with the help of US marketing executives. So its intention is to promote itself as like super gay friendly and like the only gay friendly place in the Middle East, because as sort of like a civilizing mission. And just to try and contrast with the like Arab neighboring states and just like prove itself to be better and like the champion of human rights. And so pinkwashing is a form of that. And they, like, for example, Israel really pushes itself to be, especially Tel Aviv, to be the world gay destination and the gayest city in the world. And it's really jarring because they don't actually, like, when you say you care about gay rights or LGBTQ plus people, surprisingly Palestinians don't come into that. They don't actually care about Palestinian queers, but they'll care about Israeli queers, and that's about it. That's where they draw the line.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's violence towards Palestinian queers as well, or outing them in the community and stuff like that. So it's very, very violent form of pinkwashing because it's putting Palestinian queers at risk. It's also that a lot of Israel leaders align themselves with like Bolsonaro and stuff like that, who are very much anti-LGBTQ plus. And so there is no consistent care for LGBT people. It is, like you just said, a form of marketing. How have you found that it's been used to kind of further justify Israel's settler colonialization? Like, you talk about how it's used as marketing within the US and advertisement. How have you found that it's kind of like diverted the conversation or diverted any achievement with ending the occupation?
So what comes to mind is an advert that was published by Israeli state ally Stand With Us. Was this poster, and it says, and it's just this picture of this black and white picture of like someone looking straight onto the camera, and it says Hamas, ISIS, and Iran kill gays like me. And if I lived in Gaza or Israel's neighboring states, I would be thrown in jail, mutilated, or killed. In Israel, I am free. And it's just like like how can it's very funny, but it's not funny. It's just like, how can you have the audacity? Like, how can you just say that? Because that's just very delusional and just straight up like propaganda. So this guy, Mark Hamill, who worked on the Brand Israel stuff for like pinkwashing and was also the head of Ha'aguda, I don't know how to pronounce that, but he spoke about pinkwashing and said that it's Israel's efforts to help gay Palestinians who are persecuted in the West Bank, and that Israel is the only country that's trying to help them. Also, like, urging like Palestinians like to come to Israel because they're a safe haven for gay Palestinians somehow. But then if Palestinians do go, as you said, they out them, or they deport them, or they imprison them. This just serves as, okay, they can just say all this stuff, so they can just get the props for it. So everyone's just like, oh my God, look, Israel is just so kind. Like, they would be willing to help like these poor Palestinians who live in their backward savage communities, and they're willing to help them even after all that's happened, because every like common discourse is this is a conflict, not settler colonialism. So yeah, Israel gets the props for putting themselves out there and like offering an olive branch or whatever, but it doesn't actually mean anything. It's just violence. It's just like veiled violence. And just like, you can't just stick a rainbow on things and just expect everything to be okay. Like, so that's kind of their mentality with it. And as well, there's like this very violent chant that I've heard at quite a few protests actually, where the Zionist side will chant, "Where are the gays in Gaza?" And it's just like complete erasure of queer Palestinians, and as well like promoting this idea that in the Middle East there's only Israel, and Israel is like the pinnacle of like modernity and human rights and everything that's good in the world. But everything that's good in the world, like air quotes, is whatever is synonymous with the West. And so Israel is just, okay, yeah, we're in the Middle East, but like we're Western, and like we're so developed, and you guys don't compare.
It's very much, like you said, two-sided approach, like you said. So it's not only marketing themselves and like hailing themselves as like the most liberal place in the Middle East, and that's in quotations there because they can't see us doing that. But it's also, like you said, a form of way to enact violence on Palestinians, having this as like a standout for Palestinians to go over to leave from their hometown to then just enact horrible and horrendous violence onto them. So, like you said, it's a twofold in that.
Yeah, and also I just came across a quote when I was doing some research, and it's by Hala Hassan, and she says, Israel tactfully deploys the image of the viral gay Israeli male on an international stage in order to project an image of itself as democratic and progressive in opposition to its Arab/Muslim, supposedly fundamentalist neighbors. So this is exactly like what is happening specifically with pinkwashing when it comes to brand Israel, that like Israel really loves to use religion and specifically Islam to like justify everything. And this bodes well with the West, because the West do the same thing. And it's like always villainizing the brown man, or the Muslim man, or the Muslim brown everyone. And so you really see this happening with pinkwashing, because people just don't seem to register that brown Muslim bodies are human and have sexuality of their own, or like mind of their own, or right to live. Like when it comes to pinkwashing, settler colonialism and human rights abuses like are swept under the carpet. And also something that's really interesting is that Israel loves to generalize Tel Aviv as like to represent the whole national idea of queerness, and that so basically they try to make it seem that Israel is like so accepting and so pro LGBTQ plus, when actually it's not really the case. Like, okay, Tel Aviv is quite accepting because that's what it's like marketed to be, and that's like literally the destination that it's like been manipulated to be. But when you look at other areas, like I was reading things about Israeli queers that live in other parts, like for example in Haifa or in Jerusalem, and they were saying that no, it's quite conservative, and like it's not accepting, and like Israel just loves to generalize this sentiment, but it's just like propaganda. And you see this in so many places where they love to, where governments love to generalize the sentiments of like a certain city or like the capital as like the whole area, but that's not the case. It's just propaganda.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And there's a few things there that I kind of want to touch upon what you said. The first thing was that brilliant thing you said, like, you can't just put a flag over it and call it a day and be like, yeah, we're so inclusive. I think that's so important, especially because we're in June now and it's the time for all companies to, slap on a rainbow flag onto their icon and, call it a day. And I think that's why it's so jarring, because it does just follow the kind of capitalist formula of trying to gain support from the LGBT community or trying to show their solidarity, quote unquote, again, by just slapping on a rainbow and being like, yeah, cool, we've done our part. And I think also the fact that there's not a lot of inclusivity for actual LGBTQ plus people in it, in their kind of marketization. And I'm not saying because it is just marketization and propaganda, like you said, but there is no consideration for a lot of trans people, non-binary people, even kind of lesbians. There's less effort there because it is, like you just said, a marketing ploy. So they'll hail themselves as the greatest place in the Middle East for gay people, but it's not. It can be very unsafe, like you said, for a lot of people, and especially like trans women and trans men like that. So I do think that is something that is worth mentioning and something that you touched on as well. And lastly, what you said is kind of funny in how it aligns itself with the US, because that's what it is. It's a marketing tool employed in order to silence people, but also to distract people. It's like setting off something in the corner so that no one notices that the settler colonialization is going on. And I think it's funny because the West have also used things like anti-LGBT laws in countries to justify interference with other countries. How do you think that it's also used by the West in justifying Israel's settler colonialization?
So when you look at the media is really trying to manipulate public opinion. So when you look at like public sentiments, like for example, after 9/11, so many LGBTQ plus activists actually supported the invasion of Afghanistan because it was like pushed onto them, like in the media. This narrative was pushed in the media of, okay, these places are savage, they will kill, they don't care about human rights, and they don't care about queers, they don't care about women. And so the sentiment in like the US, for example, and in the West was just like, okay, yeah, like these places like deserve to be invaded because like we need to set our American ideals, which are liberty and justice and like whatever the fuck like they think like American ideals are, which aren't, because it's not even the case in America either. But everyone loves to idealize the West and think that the West has all the answers. There's just so much justification for like colonialism and for like foreign intervention because people think it's for the greater good. And so even in the Victorian era, the British government like argued that Egyptian culture was just like about like degrading women, and the Egyptian men were inferior to British men. And so that helped like justify like the British occupation of Egypt for like the betterment of Egyptian society, and that they would liberate Egyptian women and educate Egyptian men on like proper treatment of women and like how to just act. And you see this literally everywhere. Look at anywhere in the Middle East that's been colonized, and like that, just anywhere, because Orientalism, and you'll just like see this like cases everywhere. There are too many examples to get into. So it's no surprise that it's happening in Israel right now, and has been happening for like generations, because this is just like how liberalism works. And this is just how people like feel better about themselves, where it's just like, okay, well, let's look at the bright side. And especially the West and like liberals like love to like metaphorically like put like metaphorically and literally actually put like a flag, like rainbow flag on everything. Like it's okay, like you can bomb them, like they don't matter, like they're bad people anyway.
And it's so true as well, because it's like you said, like half-baked solidarity, because, and it's it's interesting because it is coming from like Western LGBTQ communities who have occasionally been the forefront of solidarity with a lot of other movements. And obviously it has its failing. It's very much whitewash. It's very much not looking and ignoring trans people and all that jazz. But the LGBT community as a whole have lended out solidarity in a lot of places, which is very good. But like you said, it is very much half-baked because it's not understanding the cultural and the occupational background that comes with being queer in Palestine.
Yeah, what people seem to like gloss over or forget is that because everyone loves pointing fingers at, okay, the brown Muslim body, right? But then they don't like to talk about, okay, missionaries and like how Christianity went and like for example in Africa, and then was like, hey, homosexuality is bad, it's a sin, you're gonna go to hell, you guys are barbaric, let me civilize you. And it's only like recently, like what was it, 2016, where in the US where same-sex marriage was legalized, but not even like in all states, just some states. And like now under like Trump administration, there were so many attacks on like trans rights and like women's rights, on everything, but like people love to act like that's not an issue, and that America aren't fascists and that they have, yeah, as I said, that they have all the answers and that we should be following them as an example. And we should be following the UK, like just the West as an example, when it's literally like it's like just white feminism. I don't know how else to describe it other than liberalism. Can you tell I hate liberalism? But yeah.
A running theme throughout the podcast. No, but it's valid. And like you said, it's the erasure of the struggle in the West to be queer. And I think that's so important because it highlights ourselves and our country as something that's so accepting. When you're right, it's not projecting the flag onto the White House doesn't erase the fact that within the law, it's completely acceptable to, ignore or have violence towards queer people. And like you said, it's just awful because it means that a lot of people who aren't involved in activism, or who, like you said, are liberals and don't go into the further detail of understanding kind of queer identity around the world, because it's not about themselves. Do you get what I mean? It's just about their own queer identity. So they are unable to see beyond that, and they propel what they know from their queer identity and how they've had to fight for it onto other people, when that's not the case. Because within Palestine, if you're queer and Palestinian, you're fighting like so many fights. You're fighting for your identity as a Palestinian as well as your identity within the queer community. So it's a much more different struggle and experience, and therefore projecting your own opinions on your country and its rights is ridiculous, because it, like you said before, it erases the Palestinian struggle of living under a settler colonialization while being queer. Also, complicit companies within Israel's settler colonialization are also the biggest propellers of pride events in this country. So, for example, HSBC sponsored London Pride and also Birmingham Pride a few years ago, and yet they are also a complicit company within the settler colonialization.
Yeah, and to that I say, like, abolish capitalism, because how the hell can like literally nothing is ethical, nothing like if you look hard enough, you'll just see. You don't even have to look that hard. You'll just see all the cracks. You'll just see like all the blood money, and it's just like, I just want to buy socks. Like, please just let me buy socks. Like, where can I buy my socks? Because like everything is just like, yeah, smothered in blood, like metaphorical, but also literal. Like, yeah, it's wild.
It's so shocking as well, because like we'll have our pride event and we'll think about our own, or like the people before us that came and fought for queer rights, but it's literally being sponsored. The flags that you're holding are being sponsored by a company that literally profits off of Palestinian people suffering. So it's awful. And like I said before, with the police car as well that had all the pride flags on it as well. How ridiculously ironic that a police car, literally the police, who not only what they do to everything else, to everyone else, sorry, but what they do as well to queer people, and the violence that they commit against them, and yet they put a flag on it and they, you know, dance it up real nice, you know, make it all pretty to have flags on it, and yet people forget. That's what upsets me as well. A lot of queer people within the community fall for it. I think that really does upset me, because it's like, how can you do that when literally how many years ago people, especially like within America, Black trans women who were at the forefront of it all, were fighting for not only queer liberation within the country, but also within solidarity work as well. So it is very upsetting.
Yeah. To think like everyone who's paved the path and like lost their lives, just so people can like love, and then you see how it's been like commodified and like manipulated just to like sell things. Like it's just wild. It's so wild, and it's just very disheartening, because like this is literally not what the struggle is about. It's kind of exactly opposite of what the struggle is about. And yeah, just very fucked up.
It was all very fucked up. Anyway, so going into our last question now, let's put a positive spin on it all, or an optimistic spin on it all. So what can we do kind of to move away from this pro-queer stance that Israel propels, that it's upholding, and how can we kind of show solidarity with queer Palestinians, as well as calling out the pinkwashing that's going on in Israel?
I think, and I say this for everything, is that conscious raising is so important. That's like the first step. So you have to like sit down with yourself and be like, okay, what do I believe in? Okay, so for example, I'm a feminist. Is my feminism intersectional? And what does that mean? Who falls under this category? And am I practicing it in that way? And so just asking yourself the right questions, or like just having tough conversations with yourself, because a lot of people will be like, okay, yeah, like for example, look at liberals, like go to them and be like, okay, do you care about women's rights? And they're like, of course. What do you mean? Of course I care about women's rights. And then it's like, okay, so where? Like, show me an example of how you care about women's rights. Like, do you care about Palestinian women's rights? Like, do you care about what's happening to them? And yeah, so it's just like really sitting down with yourself and just evaluating, like, do you practice what you preach, and what does that mean, and what does that look like? And like the best example is like, especially like now it's Pride Month, and happy Pride everyone, but you'll just go around, like I'm in London right now, and everywhere I go there's a pride flag, and it's just like, how on earth is Primark gonna just have pride flags everywhere when they're just like built off of the labor of like the cheap labor of just brown women? And like, so how are you gonna say happy Pride and that you care about, and love is love? Like, what would you mean? And oh, this is really funny. There was so there's this like train brand called Hornby, and they made one of their carriages. They like designed it to be like love is love, and have rainbow flags and like sparkles and whatever the fuck. And then they tweeted like, hey, yeah, we just happy Pride, we just want to raise awareness. And then they also like subtweeted, they're like, by the way guys, we just want to raise awareness, we're not actually donating to any LGBTQ plus charity.
Oh my God.
Just thought you should know. And it's like, what is this? Like, if you're just gonna do something for the sake of doing it, because like performative activism vibes, like just don't do it. Like, please just don't do it. Like, what does that mean? Like, it's just a slap in the face. Like, how can you say, okay, I care, but not really, not about you, I'm just doing it because like I want to get brownie points? And that's literally what Israel is doing. Is like, okay, yeah, like Tel Aviv, gayest city in the world, but actually we will kill you if you're Palestinian. And like we find out that like if you're Palestinian period, but also if you're Palestinian gay, okay, we will make your life hell for you before we kill you. Yeah, you have to make sure that whatever struggle you're a part of, it has to be intersectional, or else like back to the drawing board, like you're not ready yet. Like,
Yeah.
but as well, not to like deter people, because of course, like learning and unlearning is so fucking difficult when you're being fed all this propaganda and all these lies, and like you don't know where to look, and it can be like quite overwhelming. But as long as you like, you have to just make the effort, and because you have to try. If you don't try, like what, you are not an active member of society. And so yeah, you have to do the work, because people's lives depend on it. Like, you need to realize that everyone's important, and so are you. And with a struggle with the revolution, like everyone needs to get in on it, and like then we can actually like make change. And yeah, so everyone's special in a way. And everyone has a part to play, and we can all like make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. That was just really lovely and optimistic. And you're right in that, like you said before, I mean, obviously within society now, LGBT people are still not accepted, and the violence towards the community is ridiculous and awful. But like you said before, within the mainstream media a couple of years ago, the lies that were being spread around about the queer community was awful. So it's our responsibility as that community to also make sure that we're not falling victim into believing it about other people just because someone's put a rainbow flag on it. And we, like, I think for a lot of people that are within the community, it's like finally somewhere showing this, but we can't fall victim to that kind of cloudy idealistic vision, because like you said, we need to play our part in showing solidarity to not only Palestinian people but Palestinian queers. So yeah, I think that was a beautiful sentiment in what we can do and make sure that our activism is as intersectional as possible, and making sure that we're there for queers around the world who don't have it as lucky as I know I do, and I know a lot of people within the Western world do. I'm really upset to wrap this up here, but we're going to have to. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to the podcast, because it's been amazing listening to you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is something that I really enjoy talking about, and writing essays about. So yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It was a pleasure.
Thank you again.